have gotten a whole file that when this thing plays out, these guys are going to be brought down, and this whole planet is going to be healed, made whole, and all life will be fixed, will be uplifted. Earth is going to be given a kind of an award for what the human race has endured.
Well, what they're going to do is we've got the same group of aliens who are planning this thing with their hybrid kids, the Illuminati. They're planning this whole thing, and then they're going to turn around and play the other card as coming as Earth protectors, as the saviors of the world, saving us from this flu panic, this flu epidemic. They're playing both sides of the cards.
Well, sure. They play with everybody.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if you are, one thing or another, they're the ultimate manipulators, and they will manipulate everybody. If you are a very violent person, they will get you to be violent against another person.
Yeah.
If they'll convince, they'll manipulate. Like in extreme cases, the mothers who have thrown their children off of bridges or drowned them. They heard voices. Well, of course. It was that thing that got seated within them, and that began to take over more and more. And that's how they work it. What your weakness is, where you are corruptible, or where you are too gentle in your ways. Let's say even those who are very, very loving, it can be, love without courage is weakness.
Yeah. Well, they've had a lot of help. I mean, they've had this elf technology, and I've warned about it before, where they can imitate God speaking to people.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's God telling them to drown their babies.
Of course.
And it's our military behind it. It's not even the aliens on this one. It's their technology originally. We've gotten all of our technology from the aliens.
I'm sure.
But I call it the elf God. That people were hearing from the elf God. It wasn't the Lord. And I've tried to tell people he does not speak to your head. Over and over, I'll say that he does not speak to your head, because these people will get these elf messages to their head, the brain waves, voices mimicking God, telling them what to do these things.
Well, that's interesting that you say elf, which is, the electromagnetic. Elf is a
extreme low frequency.
Extreme low frequency. Thank you. Because elf is used a lot in reverse speech, and it's almost like the assistants. The elves, they'll call themselves.
The elves.
The elves, and it could have something to do with just what you said. I never thought about it before.
Yeah.
But they'll say, the elves are doing this and that. Now, so yeah, there's a number of different metaphors, and the interesting thing is, I try to figure them out, but then other people who are doing this have a different take on it, because they say, well, that means, this symbol or that symbol. So it can get a little confusing sometimes.
I know. And when I started doing it, I was looking at their interpretations of these terms in reverse speech. I know exactly what they were.
Right.
They don't acknowledge Satan in half of these. They'll refer to it as something else.
Yes.
Because me and you both were hearing the owl all the time.
Yes.
I knew right away that was Satan.
Yes.
And then there was other terms that they would use and be like, no way, it's this. I would just ask the Lord while I was doing this stuff, what does that mean?
Uh-huh.
So everything and the way I perceive it is through the Lord and how he tells me what it is, because he's my foundation of this. I guess it depends on how you interpret this, is what your foundation is, what you're using as a basis,
right,
as a perimeter to how you interpret what you're hearing.
Yes. Well, that's true. And, I always give credit to David Oates, who was the founder of reverse speech, for what I learned. But we do have Parting of the Ways, because I have his course and I have his metaphor dictionary. And in his metaphor dictionary, the owl is the higher wisdom.
Yeah, he explains things in like a, I don't even know.
It's all psychological.
Yeah, it's psychological, where we see things as more spiritual.
Yes. Yeah, so, it's different, and I know that the owl, because, I've only listened to 1 million hours of this stuff now, and the owl has nothing to do with higher wisdom. When I hear it's always referring to this group.
The last show we did, I was playing what I call my amateur clips of my findings with Benny Hinn, waiting for the owl to signal.
Right,
because he would wait till he saw Satan's signal before he would start to do these false miracles and stuff he does during his charades, his shows.
Yeah.
So,
It's all, yeah, and then like for instance, the net is this thing that's this matrix type of frequency barrier that's been holding us in and dumbing us down and keeping us asleep. Because the reverse part of the mind, the reverse speech part of the mind, which I do not believe actually is the subconscious at all. I think that this part of the mind is something much greater, because it not only understands everything that's going on, it also knows just who these guys are and calls them on their stuff. It can hear them in real time, even though because I will hear one of them talking on the recording in the white noise, and then the person who is recording will address them and say, "Get out of here, Wolf," or something like that. And
yeah, Wolf is another one I've picked up for demonic entity.
Yes, Wolf.
Demon.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Vipers, serpents, the wolf, the owl, lizards, I've heard, the Ets and ETs. Those are some of them. They all refer to this group. They simply call themselves aliens, because I've had many, many, many conversations. They are very forthcoming about talking on recordings, and I have yet to receive a recording from somebody where there's not one of them speaking on it. The person doesn't realize it, but they are all over the place.
Yeah.
So
well, I can't remember the name, but there's a certain name for these demons who go on recordings. There's a certain name, and I can't think of it. It escapes my mind, but it's amusing that you say that, because there are recording spirits, they call them.
Yeah.
And they go on recordings.
Well, I listened to this tape that was truly horrible. It was on the Art Bell program a number of years ago, and it was a recording that was taken in Siberia, where these people were digging this very deep pit, and they started to hear things.
Yeah, I have that on my website.
You have that Sounds from Hell.
Sounds from Hell, yeah. So
yes.
The Siberian oil drillers or whatever it was.
And I downloaded it, and, at first couple of times it almost, makes you just, it's so creepy, so horrible sounding.
Yeah.
But I reversed all that yelling and hollering and screaming, and there was language within that whole thing.
Wow.
And it was very, very interesting, because these people who probably had one of them inside of them had done terrible things. One of the men said, "I was a boy killer." Now, what happens is, in my opinion, this is how I see it playing out. People get seated with one of these entities, and then the entity slowly will try to corrupt that person, depending upon how strong the person is and how fast they can be corrupted. And it can be a subtle thing, and the person doesn't even realize it's happening, but it's almost like they suddenly have somebody trying to influence them to do things that are very negative or evil, like the woman who throws her children off of the bridge.
Well, sure, if you don't have elves, you've always got demonic oppression, demons sitting around.